So this is the new M4 equipped Mac Mini, and it's something special. First of all, it's very small. If you compare the size to the previous generation of Mac Mini, it's like a much smaller footprint. But then when you compare it to the current generation of Mac Studio, it's like, it looks like a completely different class of product. And you'll see in a minute, the benchmarks and performance of this thing can, in many cases, keep up with the Mac Studio. So I bring up the conversation of size at the start of this video because there is nothing else on the market that is of this size, that has this kind of performance, and also is priced as well as this thing is. So this thing starts at $600 retail, $500 for students, and I'd argue that it's one of the best valued products that Apple has ever put out, at least for the base model. Now, a couple thoughts about the design. The power button is located on the bottom, and when I first saw that, I was like, that's kind of weird, but having used this for a week, it's such a light and small device that just to like tilt it up and hit it, it's effortless. Like, you won't accidentally press it or anything like that. And how often are you actually turning on and off this machine? It's like very easy to do it even one-handed. The other thing is, if you'll notice on the bottom, there's a circular grill here. So this serves as an intake and the exhaust. So typically on the Mac desktops, there's like a rear mounted exhaust that kind of sucks cool air in and then out the back. But because it's such a small device, there's no rear exhaust. It's just, it sucks the cool air in, goes through the device, and then comes out the back portion of this circular exhaust. And it's just a neat way for them to cool a device that's super small because they just didn't have the capability to put an exhaust in the back like they typically would on the larger desktops. The other thing is the built-in speaker is significantly better than the one that was on the previous generation of Mac Minis. It's still not a great sounding sound system. It's just that for people that want that super clean setup with no like speakers on their desk, you can do that on this. I think they're good enough and loud enough for that if you want that speakerless setup, but also there is no mic. So if you want to have like voice calls and stuff, you need to have a webcam or some kind of audio input device for your communications. Now, in regards to ports, there are 3 Thunderbolt ports on the back. They're either going to be Thunderbolt 4 or Thunderbolt 5, depending on the chip that you go with in terms of configurations. And on the front, there's also 2 more USB-C ports. These are not Thunderbolt enabled, but if you'll notice, there are no USB-A ports at all on this device. And if you plan on connecting a keyboard to this thing, like a wired keyboard, there are a lot of keyboards out there that still do not support like a direct USB-C to USB-C connection. You might need some kind of dongle to make it work. Now, Apple's own peripherals have been updated. They now support USB-C charging. So instead of the lightning charging hole, it now supports like a regular USB-C connection. The mouse, the Magic Mouse, has also been updated to USB-C, but it's still on the bottom. Like, this came out in 2015, I want to say. It's been like a decade of memes, of upside down charging memes on this thing. They didn't care. They're like, yeah, here's the new one. More upside down charging. So the Mac Mini itself, this comes in either the M4 chip or the M4 Pro chip. The Pro gives you more CPU and GPU cores. It also has more RAM and storage at the base and also at the top end. But the M4 Pro chip also gets you Thunderbolt 5 ports. Now, Thunderbolt 5 ports are significantly higher bandwidth than Thunderbolt 3 and 4 of the past. But the reality is that there's not a lot of utility to Thunderbolt 5 outside of displays. Like, if you're trying to connect super fast drives, Thunderbolt 3 and 4 are more than enough for it. If you want to connect ultra high resolution displays, 3 of them to this machine, then yeah, the Thunderbolt 5 connection would be useful. Just the base model though already has really good connectivity for external displays. You get 3 of them. So the M4 and M4 Pro chips are incredibly fast. These chips perform really well on benchmarks and workflows that lean on really fast CPU performance. The multi-core performance of the M4 Pro is particularly impressive to me. Now, in terms of GPU performance, the M4 chips are a decent step up over the M2 chips from a couple years back, but depending on your workflow, these new chips can be very impressive. So the way that I shoot my videos is that I have 4 4K cameras running simultaneously. So I have one in the back there, and then I have one over here, and then I have 2 in front. Depending on the camera angle that I want to use, I'll switch them in real time using the Stream Deck. And I'll just swap them depending on what I want to show you or what I want you guys to look at a particular moment. I do this stuff during my shoot. Like, I try not to edit so much later on. I try to do this stuff at the moment just so it feels a little bit more live for you guys. Now, in order to pull this off, this needs a fairly powerful system because this has 4 4K camera feeds being encoded in real time at once. And to do this, I have an M2 Ultra system. I used to use like a regular Windows system, RTX 4090, but that thing was very loud because you're running this thing the whole time of the shoot, and if you'll notice, it's quiet. I couldn't do that with any Windows systems that I built. But this GPU, or the GPU cores that are inside the system, are being pushed pretty hard. I wouldn't say that's like full, but that's probably, 60, 70% of the GPU usage. And this whole thing works. The only reason why it works is because that M2 Ultra is as powerful and as quiet as it is. So the Mac Studio handles my workflow very well, but how does the new M4 Mac Mini do? This is the same camera setup, so it's 4K cameras being fed into the system, but it's being run off of the M4 Pro Mac Mini. And you can tell the GPU pressure is pretty high, right? It's going full blast, and the 14 CPU cores are ripping, but it keeps up. And this is all real time, like it's being recorded and encoded off of that device. Now, when I first set this up, I tried to use the M2 Pro Mac Mini to tie everything together, and it wasn't even close. This thing was dropping frames like crazy, and I think it's just a very demanding workflow. When you have real-time encoding of multiple cameras, it's tough, especially if you want to do it quietly. So when the M4 Mac Mini showed up, I was like, I wanted it to work so badly, because this is so small and compact. It'd be such a testament to how powerful this thing really is if it could do this. And it did. Granted, the M2 Ultra does it better. There's more headroom on it, but that thing's like 4 times the price and like 6 times the size. And to do it on this system, that's so crazy cool. Now, it does get warm when it's going full blast for a long period of time, but it's still very, very quiet. And for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much a silent machine. Now, a quick note on gaming. So I think because this thing is priced the way that it is, relatively inexpensively, and because it's as powerful as it is at that price point, I've already seen a lot of kind of articles and publications clickbait around the idea of like, the Mac Mini is a PS5 killer. It is not. So yes, it does have inexpensive hardware, like a console, and it does have very powerful capabilities, kind of like a console, way more powerful than a console, but it does not have the library of games that makes a gaming machine. So like if you want to install Crossover and play with Wine and tweak all that stuff, or do like a Windows installation or Windows partition, you can. It's just that I think there's just, no, it's not a gaming device. It's gaming capable, and every day that goes by, it's even more capable, but we're so far away from being able to call this a gaming device. That's just my take on it. Okay, I want to move this conversation to what I think is the most important thing, the pricing and the configuration. So at the base price, it's a very good deal, but any kind of upgrade, any kind of tweak to this configuration at the base massively increases the price. And I just have thoughts about that. This unit here that I did most of my testing on is the M4 Pro chip. It's the one that they sent out for reviewers to kind of give the best impression of what the M4 Mac Mini is capable of. However, I think the vast majority of people should never even look at the Pro chip because the base M4 is already very capable. And unless you know that your workflow demands some kind of very powerful CPU and or GPU, I would not even look at that Pro pricing just because you get amazing value at that base chip. Now, in terms of the RAM and the storage, the RAM is horrifically overpriced the moment you start adding stuff. It's $200 for an extra 8 gigs of RAM and then $400 for an extra 16 gigs of RAM. It's painful just looking at those numbers on their website. Now, I did think that when I was looking at these things, I thought we should all be really thankful that Apple Intelligence came to life. Like if Apple Intelligence didn't come out, then Apple wouldn't feel the need to have 16 gigabyte models on their base model. And we might still just be looking at 8 gigs of RAM on this machine. Like for real, that in an alternate universe, that could actually have been the case. So yeah, RAM, I wouldn't spring for more unless you have a very clear need in your mind of like particular workflows that need it. I wouldn't even say most video editing would need it if you're kind of like mid-moderate levels of video editing. The other thing is storage, and the storage is equally painful to look at. I think most people at this point recognize that you can get external options. And I think on a system like this, you're not carrying it around. It makes much more sense to have an external drive. There are 2 kinds of externals I want to talk about. There's the regular fast USB drives that are relatively inexpensive, but then there's the ultra fast USB 4 or Thunderbolt type drives, and these are crazy fast. They're still not as fast as the internal storage of the Mac Mini, but if you need really fast storage, if you're working with like really large media files and you need to process it and just ingest it quickly on these systems, I would highly recommend like a USB 4 or Thunderbolt type drive instead of the regular USB 3.2 or slower drives, in case you're unfamiliar with those things. Last thing, the chip. for the people that are trying to decide, like, should I get the Pro or the non-Pro? The Pro, it's like probably $300-400 more just for the chip itself. You do get more RAM and storage, but if you're unsure and you're like not, immediately aware of that you need to get the Pro, I would just get the regular one. I also think that if you want to resell the stuff later on, like let's say you do get the regular like base M4 and you find out a year later, oh, I want something faster. I think it'd be very easy to sell off a base M4 for close to what you paid it for. That's just what I think. Okay, there you have it. That's the M4 and M4 Pro Mac Mini. Really awesome system this year.